My name is Isla, and this is the story of how I lost everything and how love quietly found me again when I was nothing but a shadow of who I used to be. I was born into a small, struggling family in a forgotten corner of the world, a place where dreams rarely survived the hunger of life. My father worked as a carpenter, building furniture for others while we sat on the bare floor. My mother sewed clothes until her fingers bled, and yet we barely made enough to survive. But even in those days, I believed in love. I used to look up at the stars and whisper, "One day, someone will love me so much that I'll never feel poor again." Then, one day, I met Eshin. He was everything I wasn't: rich, polished, confident. His eyes carried the kind of warmth that could melt even the hardest parts of me. He saw me one evening when I was delivering a bundle of clothes to his mother's house. I still remember. I wore a faded blue salwar, and my hair was tied in a messy bun. He smiled at me like I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. For months, he found reasons to talk to me: a torn shirt that needed mending, a missing button, a festival outfit. And slowly, between laughter and quiet moments, our hearts began to meet in places words couldn't reach. When he asked me to marry him, I said yes, without hesitation. My parents cried tears of both joy and fear. They couldn't believe their daughter would be part of such a wealthy family. And for a while, I thought I had finally stepped into my dream: love, security, belonging. But dreams have a way of shattering when reality begins to speak. From the very first day, Lai, my mother-in-law, hated me. She was a woman of pride, her heart colder than the marble floors of her mansion. To her, I was dirt, an unworthy girl who had trapped her son with innocence and beauty. She mocked the way I spoke, the way I dressed, even the way I laughed. And Eshin, the man who once swore to protect me, began to change too. He would come home late, eyes tired, words sharp. The man who once held my hand now barely looked at me. When Lai whispered poison in his ears, he didn't resist. He began to believe I was the problem, that I was unstable, unfit, crazy. At first, I thought it was just a phase. I tried harder, cooked his favorite meals, smiled through the pain, begged him to believe me. But the more I tried, the farther he drifted. Then one morning, without warning, Lai threw my suitcase at my feet. "Get out," she hissed. "We won't live with a madwoman." Eshin stood beside her, silent. That silence broke me more than any word ever could. I remember standing outside their mansion, barefoot, with the wind carrying away the pieces of my dignity. My heart screamed for Eshin to stop me, to say it was all a mistake. But he turned his face away. I walked until my feet bled. I walked until I couldn't cry anymore. Days passed, or maybe weeks. I couldn't tell. I had nowhere to go. My parents had died years ago, and no one wanted to take in a woman who'd been thrown out by her rich husband. I slept under a bridge, the smell of damp earth becoming my only comfort. I was no longer Isla, the girl who dreamed. I was just a ghost wandering through her own life. One evening, hunger clawed at my stomach like a wild animal. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. As I walked through a market street, the smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. I couldn't stop myself. My hands trembled as I reached out and took a small loaf from a basket when the shopkeeper turned away. He caught me, of course. "Thief," he shouted, grabbing my wrist so tightly I thought it would break. "You dirty beggar. How dare you steal from me?" People gathered, whispering, pointing, laughing. Someone spat near my feet. My heart pounded, not from fear, but shame. "I was just hungry," I whispered. The shopkeeper raised his hand to hit me, but before it landed, a voice cut through the crowd. "Stop." When I looked up, I saw him, Ryder. He was tall, dressed simply in a white shirt rolled at the sleeves, his eyes calm but sharp. There was something in his expression, not pity, but understanding. "Let her go," he said firmly. "I'll pay for it." The shopkeeper hesitated, but released me. I stumbled back, dizzy and weak, my pride crumbling along with my strength. Ryder caught my arm before I could fall. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. I nodded, but tears spilled down my cheeks anyway. He looked at me for a moment, then said, "Come with me." That's how I ended up in Ryder's home, a small, cozy place on the outskirts of town. It wasn't grand like Eshen's mansion, but it felt safe. There were books scattered on the table, a few plants by the window, and the faint smell of coffee and rain. He gave me a blanket, food, and silence, the kind of silence that heals instead of hurts. For the first few days, I barely spoke. I didn't trust kindness anymore. Every time someone had been kind before, they'd taken something from me in return. But Ryder never asked for anything. He cooked simple meals, rice and vegetables, sometimes soup, and left them for me even when I refused to eat in front of him. He told me about his work, how he repaired old houses and painted in his free time. His laughter filled the air like sunlight through dusty glass. Slowly, I began to breathe again. One morning, I woke to the sound of music. He was humming while painting by the window, sunlight turning his hair golden. I stood there watching him, realizing how long it had been since I'd felt peace. He noticed me and smiled. "Hungry?" "Yes," I said shyly. Surprising myself, he handed me a plate and said, "You should smile more often. You look like someone who's forgotten she deserves to be happy." That day, I cried, not because I was sad, but because I was starting to feel alive again. Days turned into weeks. Ryder never asked about my past, though I knew he was curious. One night, I finally told him everything about Eshen, lie, the humiliation, the loneliness. He listened quietly, without interrupting, his eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't name. When I finished, I said, "Maybe they were right. Maybe I really am crazy." Shook his head. "You're not crazy, Isla. You were just hurt. People break things they don't understand. And sometimes they break people too." His words healed something inside me. From that day, I started helping around the house, cleaning, cooking, even painting the garden fence with him. We laughed often. I began to tell him about my dreams, how I wanted to open a small tailoring shop someday, where I could make clothes for people who couldn't afford them. He looked at me with that quiet admiration again and said, "You will. You're stronger than you think." Love, I realized, doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes softly, like rain that doesn't ask for permission before it touches your skin. It was in the way Ryder always made tea for 2 cups, even when I wasn't awake yet. The way he never looked at me with pity, but with pride. The way he said my name, Isla, like it was something precious. One evening, while we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he asked, "Do you ever miss him?" "Sometimes," I admitted. Not him, exactly, but the girl I was when I loved him. She was full of dreams. Ryder smiled gently. "Maybe you don't need to miss her. Maybe she's still here, just waiting for you to see her again." I turned to him, and in that moment, something shifted. The walls around my heart began to crumble. We didn't kiss that day. We didn't need to. Love was already there, unspoken, but alive, growing quietly between us like wildflowers in broken ground. Months passed, and my laughter returned. The mirror no longer scared me. I was still scarred, yes, but I was also free. One afternoon, I found Ryder painting in the yard. On the canvas was a woman in a torn blue dress, standing in the rain, eyes closed, face tilted toward the sky. "She looks familiar," I teased. He grinned. "She should. That's you the day I found you outside the shop. I wanted to remember the moment you walked back into your own life." Heart swelled. I realized then that love wasn't about saving someone. It was about seeing them, truly seeing them, even when the world had turned its back. A year later, under the same sky that had once witnessed my despair, Ryder and I got married. It wasn't a grand wedding, no diamonds, no guests in silk, just a few close friends, some wildflowers, and the soft music of the wind. I wore a simple white sari that I stitched myself, and he wore the same white shirt he'd worn the day he found me. When he held my hand and said, "I promise to never let you walk alone again," I knew this was the home my heart had always been searching for. Sometimes, when the nights are quiet and the moonlight falls on our little house, I think about Eshen and Lai. I don't hate them anymore. If they hadn't broken me, I would have never learned how strong I could be. If they hadn't thrown me out, I would have never found Ryder. Life has a strange way of leading us where we belong, even if it breaks us first. Now I spend my days sewing dresses for women like me, women who have been told they're not enough. Every stitch I make carries a piece of my story, a whisper of hope. Ryder paints beside me, our laughter filling the home we built with nothing but love. Sometimes he teases, "So, Mrs. Isla Ryder, do you still believe love makes you rich?" I smile and say, "Yes, but now I know it's not gold or money that makes you rich. It's the heart that stays when the world walks away." That's my story of losing everything I thought I needed, only to find the one thing I truly did. Love didn't rescue me. It reminded me that I was never lost, just waiting to be found.